I built a functioning windmill. Let's take a look at how I built it and how it works. Not only does this windmill function, but it actually started with the functions. That was something I wanted to try, so I started off with the gears to make sure that my windmill would have plenty of room for them and be ready for them from the very beginning. The next thing was the base, which is where I usually start with my creations, although I did try something new here with all these technique bricks, something I'll probably be trying again because it works well to get a sturdy base and basically whatever size you could want. The next thing I did was the foundation of the windmill. I used a similar technique to the blocks in my fighting pit. This has 2 layers. The top layer is not actually attached to anything, but all these 1x4 bricks are attached by hinge plates to each other, and it rests very securely on top of the second layer, which is all attached to the base. These L bricks, they do a great job of keeping the second layer comfortably sandwiched inside. That was sort of a happy accident. I didn't do any math for this, but it just worked perfectly. The next thing, of course, was to build the walls around it and make sure I could get the right shape there. Again, kind of a happy accident. This is actually a 7-sided wall with 7 of those brown pillars and 7 tan parts in between. So kind of an interesting shape. After I had roughed that out, I started work on the grindstones. Would you believe it or not, this was actually one of the hardest parts, not the grindstone itself, but the box that goes around the grindstone, which I'm working on right here. I spent hours on camera on that box, and I spent even more time off camera working on it. First, it was too big, it didn't really fit inside the walls, and then it was it just wouldn't get in the right place, and then it didn't look right inside the box because I wanted it to be white inside for the flower, right? And I didn't have the right pieces in white, I had them in black or other colors. So I just kept fiddling with that box for a really long time, but finally I was able to get it where I felt like it was good enough and I could move on at least. I'm also, of course, trying to get all the gears here in the right place for when we put the sail on top of the windmill. And once I had gotten all that figured out, I started with the wall. You'll recall I already had the rough design, but I just needed to make it all equally tall so it would all be reaching the roof height. This basically uses a lot of clips, clip and bar connections, and they're all attached to the wall panels there with a half stud offset. As you can see inside, lots of jumper plates, lots of clips and bars. My first idea here was that maybe I could do like a cutaway and you would see the inside and half of this wall. But I took one look at the inside of that wall and I said, no, we do not want to be seeing that, right? So instead of seeing the inside of the wall, I decided you'll just pick that entire thing up, you'll take the roof off, you'll pick the wall off, and that way you'll be able to see the inside 360 and really get a good look at what that function in there is really doing. The next thing, of course, was the roof, and you'll notice I have a tire in here. My initial idea was I'll have this tire, I'll have the gear on top of it, and then you'll put the roof onto that will be stationary, right? And then you'll put the roof on top of that, and where the gears meet, they'll turn. Well, turns out if you just try and lay the roof on top of that, you can't turn the gears together. They're not sturdy enough, they're not close enough, they're not held together, so they won't really turn. So I decided that I needed my gearbox to be inside my roof, and that entire gearbox, both gears, would be coming off the shaft that runs all the way down to the functions inside. So that was a little more complicated than I had anticipated. I was able to use a worm gear, which is a very interesting technique piece. It's that gray piece that will be in the center in a little bit. It has an axle hole, but it's like it doesn't have any friction, so it's kind of interesting for a technique piece and very handy in this particular instance, as it means that you can just take the roof off without any friction and put it back on, which is pretty important because otherwise that axle being right in the middle, it would be really hard to actually push something onto it. Speaking of the roof, cone roofs, they're basically my nemesis. I have so much trouble with cone roofs, so it's between that box and the inside and this cone roof as to what part of this build took me the most time. But I definitely spent plenty of time on this cone roof. In the end, we have actually a fairly sturdy design with 2 sets of mixel joints attaching each piece. And inside of it all is the gearbox I was mentioning earlier. Now, at first I had this front axle that's going to attach the sails. I had it coming out horizontally, but eventually I changed it up a little with these big knobby gears so that it's at the same angle as the rest of the roof. So a lot going in there. We have those 2 gears in the middle, and it's all set up so that you can just stick it inside this roof and attach it to the top. As you can see, we have here the 2 layers of mixel joints attaching everything together. At the top, we have a flex tube and these brown tiles going around, which are actually attached by minifigure hands, which is the only thing that was small enough to fit in there. And there's that flex tube right attaching all the other pieces together. Like most cone roofs, of course, this is a little gappy, right? We can see some light coming through on the inside, but it's really not that bad, especially, of course, when you're looking at like the whole mock. There's that hole for the axle. There's, definitely some gaps, and I am missing all my 1x2 tiles, which at this point I had already cannibalized for another build. But there's the roof. Next up, of course, the sails. For these, I used some large white panel-like pieces. I just happened to have 7 of them, so I had to build one of them out of smaller pieces, but I wanted to, for the most part, be using single pieces here because I just felt it would give you more of the illusion of like cloth sails. I would have liked to have 3 for each of the lines, but I did not have that many. So it's a little smaller than I would have liked. Originally, I started off with 2 mixel joints, trying to attach these and get a nice angle on them, but that just looked awkward and inconvenient, and I realized that these white pieces, they have a slope anyways, so it's just like on a real windmill, those sails are sloping in a little bit so they can catch the breeze better. But here you already have the slope, so I realized I didn't really need to finagle it with clips or mixel joints or anything. I could just attach them straight and they would have that slope all ready to go. So once I finally finished the design and gotten the brown around the edges as thin as I wanted it to be, then I just put them all together here at first, as you can see, with the mixel joints, and we're getting a kind of weird inset shape that just didn't work very well when I put it on there. It sort of got caught on the roof and stuff. So here we go with just the straight attachments, and here I am editing the roofs, especially the part right around the axle that comes out to attach the sails. As I mentioned before, my initial design was simply a horizontal axle, so it'd be perpendicular to the wall here, but I realized that didn't look quite realistic, so I went through the trouble of making my axle a little bit sloped, same slope as the roof slope, right? And that way the sails are at a natural angle coming off the roof. Speaking of this roof, just like on a real windmill, you can turn the roof around. I mean, it depends on the windmill design, but like on this kind of windmill, you'll turn the roof around so you can catch the wind from whatever side of the sky, right, it's coming from. This roof also, you could turn it around and face those sails to whatever side of the windmill that the wind is blowing from. The next step, of course, was the landscaping. My first design for this was sort of these rolling hills. I was gonna put these wheats, which are all on green tiles. Here I am building a slopey section with green, and I was gonna just like drape those tiles over it, and it was gonna look really nice, but it just didn't. It just didn't turn out. It just didn't look the way I wanted it to. So I decided I'm just gonna lay these tiles out flat. If I had been thinking of that when I built it, I could have done plates instead of tiles, and I could have actually attached them. But by the time I had already done all those tiles, I figured, what's the point? I'm just gonna lay them down flat here, and nobody will know the difference, right? Next thing I did was add some sunflowers and a little bit of vegetation. Not a whole lot. I didn't want to go overkill. I felt like it didn't fit with the style of the build to have a whole lot of plant pieces on the ground, but just some bushes and some cows and those sunflowers, of course. Taking a closer look at the wheat field, you can see we're using mostly technique pins and half pins and axles, and some ice cream cones too, and some 4L bars, and these are all on green tiles, just resting on there. Here's the windmill with the working sails. The inside of the mill has this dual grindstone, right? So the wheat comes through the top grindstone. Theoretically, there's a hole in it, and then it gets caught between the two grindstones and comes out as flour. And then from that box, it comes into another box or into a sack if you hold the sack up in the right place. Here you can see the 3 pieces. This way you can get a good look at all the interior functions and everything, and enjoy the windmill. This windmill is on LEGO Ideas, so I would really appreciate your support. The link is in the description. And if you would like to like the video, I would like that. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day.